Hello, my name is John Chapman. I'm talking on this particular subject for a very few minutes. It's a 45-minute talk, and if I was to talk about the Enigma machine, which is this machine next to me, that's a 2.5-hour presentation. But we're going to do that in about 6 minutes, in a minute. Codes and ciphers were important during World War II, and the code breaking, which was what Bletchley Park did during World War II, was absolutely critical to the war effort. From 1939 through until 1945, Bletchley Park was right at the centre of breaking codes, not just for the UK and for the British, but for the Americans, the Russians, and all our other allies. And it was quite important the work they did there, to an extent that historians from 1974, when Bletchley Park's secrets started to come out with a book by a chap by the name of Winterbottom, the historians confirmed that Bletchley Park reduced the war by upwards of 2 years and saved hundreds of thousands of lives by doing so. And that was actually very important for that period. The kind of people at Bletchley Park were people like Alan Turing. Alan Turing, of course, has some very sad stories, although he really was one of the most important people at that particular time in breaking codes. Him, Gordon Welshman, and lots of others. In fact, if you look at the top 60 people at Bletchley Park, not just men but women as well, it was a good 60 of them, as well as Alan Turing. Alan Turing was one of 60 top code breakers at Bletchley Park. You just don't hear about the Tommy Flowers, the Gordon Welshmans, and the Captain Jerry, who is quite a character on his own. You don't hear so much about those. Turing, of course, was gay. At that time it was illegal, and after the war, when he had an affair with a young boy, the young boy stole from him. Turing, as if you've seen The Imitation Game, Turing committed suicide. He committed suicide, and his mother always said he never committed it. It was an accident, because he did experiments, mathematical experiments, and used a chemical which invariably killed him, which was a shame. And they say that he'd eaten an apple and got some of it on the fruit of the apple, which invariably killed him. So Turing came to Bletchley Park, and he had some rather interesting ways about him. He would always cycle in, and he knew that his cycle, which was a fixed wheel bike. Now, any of you over 60 years of age will know what fixed wheel bikes were like. And of course, if your chain came off, the only way to get it back on was to pedal backwards. Turing had a fault with his bike, and after 65 revolutions he would count, and then he would cycle backwards, and the chain would slip off and come straight back on again. And that was how he worked. But he'd also cycle with a gas mask on. He'd only cycle with a gas mask on in the summer. Why would you cycle with a gas mask on in the summer? Not because of a gas attack. No, he had hay fever, and the only way he got any relief from his hay fever was by wearing his gas mask in the summer. So he wasn't quite as mad as people thought he was. He was quite a character, really. The Enigma machine, which is this machine to the side of me, is a machine that has a number of wheels. Invariably they could be 3 wheels or 4 wheels. This particular machine that I've got here has 3 wheels, and it has some lights in it. So it has an alphabet with lights on. It has another alphabet with buttons on, and when you press the button, a light comes up, and the first wheel moves once. When you press a button again, a different light comes up, because the wheel that's moved once has changed all the codes. Now, the way it's set up is this. The 3 wheels are set up each day, and they're set up from what is described as the wheels, the alphabet. So you set them A, B and C one day, C, D and E the other day, E, F and G, and it could be one of 26 combinations. So you can see what I'm getting at. You've got quite a complicated machine here. 25 to the power of 5 to the power of 5, 26, because there's 5 wheels, to the power of 26. Then in front of the Enigma machine, now you need to keep up with this, because so far you should have a calculation of near 17,500. In the front is a Steger board, which is a plug board, basically. And the Germans decided to make this Enigma machine even more complicated. So when you press a button and the light comes on, a current runs through the wheels, the wheel changes, it hits a reflector, comes back, and then goes back and turns a different light on. So you press another button. Then, of course, you take the 26 letters of the alphabet, but you only plug in 10 plugs into 10 holes. So 10 into 10, A into Z, B into X, and you change it every day. At the end of every evening, the Germans would change the code. They'd say what the wheels would be set at, and they would change every night at 12 o'clock, and what the plug ball would be set at. But they wouldn't have 13 into 13, because that's getting too complicated with 26. And what you don't want is too many 26, and divided by 2 is 13. So they plugged 10 into 10, which made the complication quite a bit. So once you've got that, by the power of 26, of course, and you add that up, you would get 17,500, which means the chance of breaking that German Enigma machine code is actually just under 159 million to 1, which the Germans, of course, thought was impossible for anybody to break. Well, they didn't realise what the British, with all their allies together, could actually do. Thanks to the Polish, who delivered an Enigma machine that they'd broken and delivered the code books. And of course the British then, through what they call pinching, were able to steal code books from submarines. The Americans, if you remember, at the turn of the last millennium, brought a film out about stealing an Enigma machine from a submarine. And the Americans did. But they were 4 years late. We'd already stolen Enigma machines from 5 different submarines, including U-110, 253, U-47 and U-53, which was various Enigma machines stolen out of submarines. And therefore, with the code books, they could come back to the UK, back to Bletchley Park, and they were able to work out the German codes. The Germans, of course, then moved on with Enigma's, Hitler's personal code machine, which was millions of times more complicated than the Enigma machine, and that was towards the end of the war. And the British at Bletchley Park, with their allies, were able to break that new code machine without ever seeing it, by pure maths and working through the system. So that's the kind of thing that there is to see at Bletchley Park, and that's how the codes and ciphers would work. What happened in 1943 was, of course, that Turing, with his team and various others, needed to work on this new type of code machine that was Hitler's personal code machine, but was quite an important machine. And they needed what they called some kind of mathematical machine, which we now know is a computer. And that's where Colossus come in. And you'll see from the picture, Colossus was, of course, the width of the screen that you've got in front of you, something like, in old money, 12 feet, 4 metres, and then a depth of, technically, longer than it was wider, and that was something like 5 metres, with a height of 2 metres, 6'6", nearly 7 foot. Had 2,500 valves in it. Now, for those of you who don't know what a valve is, trust me, you've got to Google it, because when you see 2,500 of these valves inside it, you'll understand what it's all about. They had a Mark II Colossus, which came very soon after Mark I, and they managed to get it down to 2,000 valves. And you can imagine turning this machine on, valves would blow. Well, they didn't. The techies at Bletchley Park were able to bring the current, instead of turning it on, they bring it up gently and they take it down gently. And in 1996, a group of technicians, 12 of them, decided to rebuild Colossus from 5 pictures. That's all they had, because at the end of the war, Churchill said, "You will break this machine up. I don't want anybody knowing about this computer," or whatever he called it, "nothing wider than the width of my hand, and you will break it up and you'll dispose of it." Now, like all good secret intelligence officers, you never take any notice of politicians, and they actually broke them all up and took 2 of the Colossus machines, and we had 11 at Bletchley Park, technically, only 9 working, and they took them away and they boxed them up. And we've had them coming back from GCHQ, because they now don't know what to do with these museum pieces, to Bletchley Park, and this team reassembled a Colossus from a few bits and also rebuilt it as well. So if you want to see the first ever electronic computer, you have to come to the National Museum of Computing at Bletchley Park, and that'll just give you an idea from there. So the people that came to Bletchley Park from Government Code and Cipher School was a group called Captain Ridley's Shooting Party. Now, this was a group of technicians with some very nice young ladies who were their secretaries. The people who lived in Bletchley thought there was something naughty going on. They weren't. They were there to do a recce of Bletchley Park, and it was them with Captain Ridley and his shooting party, who brought their own chefs with them as well from the Savoy, and they would come and they checked it all out, and that's how Bletchley Park started, was literally bringing in people from Government Code and Cipher School to Bletchley Park. Bletchley Park has developed considerably now. We now have at least 20 of the buildings that were there during World War II rebuilt to a large extent and open in various shapes and sizes. The mansion is probably the biggest one, where there's 30 rooms upstairs, there's rooms downstairs, and there's various other activities going on. And as you walk round, and you can't get round Bletchley Park in less than 3 days. And if you want to learn about codes and ciphers,